Thanksgiving dinner was always a tense affair in my family, but this one was different. The kind of different you feel in your gut before it even begins. I arrived with 2 bottles of wine, a homemade pie, and a tight knot in my stomach. My name was still on the house deed. Hell, I've been covering the mortgage for 6 years, but when I walked in, my mom barely looked up from her phone. Eric, of course, was already at the table, laughing like he owned the place. He always laughed the loudest when he had something to hide. His third failed business had just quietly folded, but you'd never know from the way my parents fawned over him. My dad clapped him on the back like he'd just come home from war. I sat down, trying not to take it personally. I always tried. Dinner started off civil. Turkey, stuffing, small talk. Then my mom asked when I was finally going to settle down, like my successful brother. I took a breath, smiled politely, and said, maybe when I stop working 70-hour weeks to keep this house from foreclosure. My dad slammed his fork down. That's enough. You think money makes you better than your family? No, I said quietly. But it kept this roof over your heads. That has to count for something. He stared at me like I was a stranger. Then he said the words I'll never forget. Paying the mortgage doesn't make you blood. Silence. Even Eric looked uncomfortable, but only for a second. My mom gave this sad little shake of her head and muttered, "You've always been jealous of Eric." It's exhausting. I stood up. My hands were shaking. No one tried to stop me. I walked out the front door, pie untouched, wine unopened. That night, I turned off my phone. The next morning, I canceled the auto payments. Mortgage, utilities, their credit card minimums. Everything I'd been quietly covering for years. I wasn't doing it out of spite. I just realized they didn't see me as family. I was a wallet with legs. I started a list. Every loan I'd repaid. Every medical bill I'd quietly paid off. Over $128,000 in total. And for what? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. They didn't love me. They tolerated me. As long as I kept paying. I didn't answer when they started calling. Dozens of voicemails, some angry, some pitiful. My dad's voice boomed through one. You think you can just walk away from your responsibilities? Funny. I'd spent my entire adult life cleaning up after their irresponsibility. And then came Eric's voice, the one that chilled me the most. Hey, just call me back, all right? We can fix this. I need you, man. He always needed me, especially when things went bad. But this time, I wasn't coming back. It didn't start with Thanksgiving. That was just the match. The fire had been smoldering for years, buried under duty, guilt, and the sick hope that maybe, just maybe, if I gave enough, I'd finally be seen. I started helping financially right after college. Eric had dropped out of his second program and moved back home to figure things out. Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs and living in a shoebox studio just so I could send half my paycheck home every month. Just until we're back on our feet, my mom would say. But the problem was, they never tried to stand up on their own. When the house went into pre-foreclosure, I stepped in. Quietly. An extra freelance gig here, some drained savings there. I paid the overdue amount and had the mortgage put under my name. My dad told people at church he'd refinanced to help with rates. I let him have that lie. I still don't know why. Eric, meanwhile, always landed on his feet because someone else was always breaking the fall. Failed startups, unpaid loans, DUI fines, even a surprise pregnancy scare once. He always had a mess, and I always cleaned it up. He had charm, that slippery kind that makes people want to believe in him. Our parents worshipped him like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs, even when he was unemployed and couch surfing. One time, he stole $600 from my desk drawer while staying over. I confronted him, and he gave me this wounded look like I'd accused him of murder. "You really think I'd do that to you?" he said. "I'm your brother." Our mom made me apologize. I started therapy. Quietly, online. My therapist called it parentification. Said I'd been cast in the role of adult since I was 12, while Eric was allowed to stay a child forever. It made sense. Hurt like hell, but it made sense. After Thanksgiving, I expected the silence to feel cold. Instead, it felt warm. Like breathing real air for the first time in years. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner, slept soundly. My phone stayed off for 2 weeks. And for the first time, nobody needed me. Or so I thought. One day, I checked my email and found a fraud alert from my credit card company. Suspicious activity detected. $1,979 charge at Best Buy. I didn't think much of it. Probably some skimmer at the gas station. I reported it, got a new card, moved on. Then came another alert. A new card application, approved. Under my name. At a bank I'd never used. That's when my stomach dropped. I pulled my credit report. There were 3 new accounts opened in the last 60 days. All under my social. One already had $6,200 charged. The others were climbing. I froze everything, filed a police report, and sat in stunned silence. Who the hell would do this to me? And then I saw it. One of the transactions, E&J Auto Performance. Eric and Jason. His old garage pipe dream. The one he swore he'd resurrect when the time's right. The rage didn't come right away. First came the disbelief, then the nausea. Then I drove. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to fight. I just wanted him to look me in the eye and tell me the truth. I found him in the garage behind my parents' house, the one my dad used to use for woodworking before Eric turned it into his office. The lights were on, music playing from a Bluetooth speaker. I stood there for a full minute before knocking. He opened the door like nothing was wrong. "Hey, man," he said with that same crooked smile that used to get him out of everything. Wasn't expecting. "Did you open a credit card in my name?" He blinked, laughed, like I just accused him of murder. "What? No. What are you talking about?" "E&J Auto," I said. "You used my name. My social. I have the bank statements." His eyes flicked just slightly to the side. That one twitch gave him away. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me. "How long?" I asked. Eric sighed and sat on the edge of a workbench, like this was just a misunderstanding between old friends. "I was going to tell you. I just needed a little startup cash, man. You froze me out, wouldn't return my calls. I didn't have a choice." "You had every choice," I snapped. "You just didn't like the ones that didn't involve stealing from me." "It's not stealing if I was going to pay you back." I almost laughed. "You've been paying me back for 15 years. That wiped the smirk off his face. "Look," he said, voice softening. I screwed up. "Okay?" I was desperate. "The parents are drowning. I'm drowning. You've always been the one who holds it all together." "Not anymore," I said, turning to leave. That night, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, running every possibility in my head. I thought about eating the cost. Again, just paying it off, freezing the account, pretending it never happened. But something broke in me that night, the last thread of loyalty. I filed the fraud report the next morning. The bank confirmed he used my name and social for the applications. They'd need to verify formally, but they were already escalating the case. They'd seen it before family fraud, they called it. Then came the call from my mom. "How could you do this to your brother?" she hissed, skipping right over the crime and straight to the guilt trip. "He stole from me," I said, holding the phone like it was poison. "He committed fraud. You're blowing this out of proportion. He just needed help." "No," I said. "He needed consequences." There was a pause. Then her voice hardened. "If you press charges, don't bother coming back here." I almost said, "You think I want to?" But I didn't. A week later, I got a call from a detective assigned to the case. They were moving forward. Eric had used my information to apply for 5 cards total. Charges across the accounts totaled over $27,000. Some of it had already been liquidated into crypto wallets. He was smarter than I gave him credit for, just not smart enough. The detective asked if I wanted to pursue criminal charges. I said yes, not out of revenge, but because it was time. Someone had to say enough. 2 days later, Eric was arrested. I didn't even know until my coworker sent me a mugshot from a local news site. "Your brother?" she asked. I nodded. "Was." The fallout was immediate. My mom showed up at my apartment the next morning, pounding on the door like the building was on fire. "You called the cops on your own brother?" she shrieked the moment I opened it. "What kind of person does that?" I didn't let her in. I stood in the doorway, blocking her view. "A person who's been stolen from. Lied to. Used. He's facing jail, you understand that? Real prison time." "Good," I said flatly. "Maybe he'll learn something there." Her face twisted into something feral. "You've always been cruel. You act like you're better than us, but you're just cold. You were born cold." She stormed off before I could respond, but the words stuck to me like oil. The next few weeks were a blur. Eric was released on bail, pending formal charges. My dad sent a single text, "Hope you're happy." That was the last I heard from him. What surprised me was how quiet it felt afterward. No more frantic calls, no requests for money, no guilt bombs disguised as conversations. Just silence. And somewhere in that silence, I started to breathe again. I finally met with the assistant district attorney assigned to Eric's case. They were pursuing multiple felony charges: identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy. Federal level. It was bigger than I'd imagined. Apparently, he'd crossed state lines using the card, unknowingly bumping it to a federal case. "Are you sure you want to proceed?" the ADA asked. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. Still, it wasn't easy. The emotional weight didn't go away. I didn't sleep well. I kept thinking about Christmases as kids, playing video games together, how I used to sneak extra candy from Halloween just to share with him. But then I'd look at the credit statements, the forged signatures, the voicemail from a collections agency asking for Mr. Eric. And I remembered exactly who I was dealing with. 3 months later, my grandmother passed away. She was the only one who never made me feel like a burden. I used to call her on Sundays. She'd always say, "Don't let them take your shine, sweetheart." Her funeral was small, quiet. The air was thick with unspoken words. My parents didn't speak to me. Eric wasn't allowed to attend. He was under travel restrictions. A week later, I got a call from her estate attorney. "She left everything to you," he said. "The house, the savings, even the little things, her jewelry, her journals." I broke down on the phone, not because of the inheritance, but because someone in this family had finally seen me. And just like that, the tide shifted. My parents tried to contest the will, claimed I manipulated her, that I turned her against the family. The judge didn't buy it. She'd had everything legally prepared years before. And then came the final blow, the formal indictment. Eric was going to trial. I thought I'd feel vindicated, triumphant even, but what I felt was simple, free. The courthouse smelled like paper and stale coffee. I sat quietly in the back, watching as Eric shuffled into the courtroom in a cheap suit, wrists cuffed. He didn't look at me. I didn't expect him to. He'd fired 2 public defenders already. Thought he could talk his way out of it. Thought charm could outpace consequence. But this time, charm wasn't enough. The charges were laid out in detail: 5 counts of identity theft, 3 of wire fraud, and 1 federal charge for crossing state lines with fraudulent intent. The total debt reached over $27,000, plus restitution fees. The judge read it all aloud like a grocery list, and Eric just stood there, swallowing hard. When the prosecutor asked me to testify, I kept it simple. I told the truth. I love my brother. I helped my brother. And he used me like an ATM. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Repeated, deliberate theft. He didn't just steal money. He stole trust. Safety. Years of my life. I didn't cry. I thought I might. But instead, I felt this weird steadiness, like I'd been training for this moment for years. Eric never apologized. Not once. His lawyer tried to paint him as a man, pushed to desperation by family dysfunction. He even implied that I bore some blame for cutting him off emotionally, as though boundaries were an act of violence. The jury wasn't buying it. Eric took a plea deal before the verdict, 4 years, with possible parole in 2. Probation after that, restitution mandatory. The judge didn't mince words. Your family gave you more chances than you deserved. This court will not do the same. My parents didn't look at me once after the sentencing. They walked past me in the hall like I was air. My mother's lip curled, like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. My father's face was carved from stone. I drove home in silence. Didn't even play music. I just kept replaying the moment the judge banged the gavel, like punctuation on a sentence I'd been writing my entire life. When I got home, I opened the box from my grandmother's estate. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated 2 years before she died. "I've watched you carry everyone on your back. I wish I'd stepped in sooner. You're not invisible, sweetheart. You're the strongest person I've ever known. Let this be the start of your life, not theirs." There was a cashier's check tucked inside. $18,000. Enough to pay off every debt they left me with. That night, I sat in my own apartment, fully paid off now thanks to the inheritance, and made a decision. I was going to take a year off. Travel. Read books. Learn to cook. I'd lived my whole life for other people. It was time to live for myself. And then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "He's your brother. Blood is blood. You'll regret this." I stared at it for a second. Then I blocked the number and kept eating my pasta. 6 months later, I was living a completely different life. I rented a tiny cabin upstate. No Wi-Fi, no family, no chaos. Just trees, quiet, and air that didn't feel like it was choking me. I started drawing again, something I hadn't done since high school. I hiked every morning, cooked real meals, and for the first time since I could remember, I wasn't exhausted all the time. It wasn't just peace. It was recovery. Occasionally, I'd get emails or blocked number calls. People trying to reach out on behalf of the family. A cousin asking why I was being so dramatic. A former friend saying I should move on, life's short. But none of them had ever lived as an afterthought. None of them knew what it was like to give everything and still be called a stranger at your own dinner table. Eric's sentencing made the news in our town. Not front page, but enough to ripple. My parents kept quiet publicly, but I heard through a neighbor that they were telling people I set him up, that I'd planned it all out just to take the inheritance. I didn't care, because I was done trying to fix the story. One day, I got a letter in the mail. Real handwriting. No return address. I knew it was from Eric before I even opened it. Inside, a single page. You win. Hope you're happy. I lost everything. No apology. No ownership. Just spite dressed up like surrender. I burned the letter in the fireplace and watched the flames turn it to ash. And that night, I wrote a list. Not of debts, not of things I'd paid for, but of things I'd learned. That blood isn't love. That sacrifice doesn't guarantee loyalty. That boundaries are not cruelty. And that peace is sometimes the most painful thing to choose, because it means walking away for good. A month later, I had the house from my grandmother fully renovated and donated it to a domestic abuse shelter. I didn't need it. I already had everything I'd ever wanted: distance, clarity, and the power to choose my own story. I don't know if I'll ever speak to my parents again. Sometimes I think about it. I imagine a version of the world where they show up and say, "We were wrong." But that version doesn't exist. They chose Eric. Over and over again. So I chose myself. And in doing that, I finally became free.